All right. So if anyone else comes in, they can just check up the recordings on YouTube later on our Burst channel. But otherwise, hello everyone. Thank you again for coming to our very first academics event workshop for Burst. I'm really excited to introduce this new workshop to you all. It is the Summer Research Internship Info Session. So it's our first time doing it, but I'm hoping that what we have prepared today will help you excel further for your research internship programs and your applications. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of an icebreaker. So if everyone in the chat who's present, if you're able to write your major, year, or your classification and what summer program interests you have for this year. If you can put that in your chat, I'll look at it and I'll see how I can cater to you all today. We'll take about 2 to 3 minutes. Neuroscience sophomore addiction research. Nice. Okay. I'm assuming that most of you are underclassmen. And I think that's a good idea, or that's a good thing. So then I can help you guys out. Nursing freshman, oncology, nursing, bio sophomore, genetics, cell biolab research. This is good. Okay, computer science, freshman, STEM related, sophomore biochem. Awesome. Okay, I'll read up on these later on. I'll get started. This is good. So we have mostly sophomores and freshmen. And okay, cool. So let's get it started. So for today, I'm splitting it up into 2 parts, or I was supposed to split it up into 2 parts, but because this year we're still online, unfortunately, I'll only be doing part 1. So hands-on activities will be done when we're able to be in person, and if we get more people to sit like in a closed circle, and I can actually look at you guys' laptops or your devices and help you out with researching. So I'll be going over the introduction, the timeline for how to plan your researches or your programs, your to-do list, cover letters and written supplementals like your essays, personal statements, and how to reach out to professors for letter recommendations. And lastly, the burst resources that we have for you. Okay, so what types of summer programs are there? So the most general or the most common ones are the wet lab versus the dry lab. And I have a little infographic to show you all later on after this slide. But the other 2 distinct types are the clinical and the medical side. So I did mostly medical and clinical for summer programs, and I did wet lab research in school for genetics in Baylor. So then I can touch a little bit on both later on, but I can go more in depth for medical if any of you need that. And the purpose, what is the whole deal with summer programs? Why should we do this? So before I go any further, the one thing I have to say is do summer program internships for your own self and for your own curiosity. Don't do this as like a checklist where you say you want to go into medical school or you want to go to grad school or master's program, for example, and you have to do the summer program just to get in. If you do that, it will be a lot more tiresome because at the summer programs, they're very rigorous. Usually if it's a stay away from home type of program, then you usually have to stay up very late to look at research journals, work with your TAs. If something doesn't go right in the lab, you have to go back and do those things. So it has to be out of your own curiosity and your own interests. So make sure this is just for yourself and for your satisfaction. And so another purpose for summer programs is to improve your analytical and technical skills. It helps you a lot with looking at data analysis and how to solve different types of troubleshooting errors when you're in labs. And this will help you a lot when you want to apply for on-campus lab research for Baylor professors in the future. And this is also a good preview for your future dream careers. So if you want to know more about that specific field for your pre-grad, or if you're pre-med, or if you're MD, PhD, this is a good way to get a realistic view and to talk to those PIs and those TAs on what their life is like as that actual career. And yeah. All right, so this is the little infographic that I was talking about earlier. Wet lab is mostly what you've done in your chemistry labs or your OChem labs. You actually get to touch reagents, you get to work with those organisms. Dry labs, however, you're doing more something like physics. You're using just pen, paper. You actually get to do those laboratory experiments, but you're not actually touching those life science or like biotic factors. And if you, I know some of you are actually computer science, right? So computer science would be considered dry lab research. All right, so timeline. I'm moving a little bit faster so that I could get to like the nitty-gritty details of the timetables because I know that's actually the most important part. But so timelines, this is a disclaimer. So I've actually had to learn from my mistakes of how to organize these things from when I was applying for internships in high school. So right now what I have is what works perfectly for me. So it's a personal example. For you all, you can feel free to modify it for your own needs, edit it however you want, or do it completely different, but this is just something that helped me succeed. So the tools that you'll need are any spreadsheet applications, or you can use a notebook or a piece of paper and draw it out. Um, and so I use Excel spreadsheets and Google Calendars and Google Docs. And I just created those simple timetables. I'll show you later in the next slide. And they're really simple, but they're very efficient and easy on the eyes. So the one thing you should, or I recommend you to use are columns. And so each column, you should include your program, your program's websites, the links to those, the deadlines. So sometimes the programs require you to pay like $50 or $60 just for them to read these. And so those are due sometimes by mail, or sometimes they're due even like a week or 2 weeks before your actual application is due. So you have to always be on time with everything, be prompt, and it's a good idea to always do things even earlier, like 1 week advance from those deadlines. You also have to have deadlines for your letter recommendations, your essays, and your submissions. And then your professors for your letter of recs. I'll go into depth for that later on, and the status check for if you completed or if you've already submitted your applications. So this slide is actually my slide from 2020. Unfortunately, COVID came, so all of our programs had to be canceled and terminated, especially the ones in NYU because New York is pretty big and their COVID cases were rising pretty heavily. And so, for example, as you can see here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right here, the program, recommenders, the essay status, deadlines, and submission status, all of these are pretty much the basic building blocks for your timetable. And everything in green was what I've already finished or highlighted in green. And so I did color coding. So red was did not submit, yellow was still working, it's work in progress, and then green is completely done, we're good to go. And so you can also follow something like this, and I'll put this in the Burst website and the Burst YouTube page. So if any of you do want to copy this, feel free to take this template. All right, so the to-do list. So when you're getting into looking at programs, first I have to heavily emphasize to do your research on all these programs. So not just the professors or the labs, those are really important, but also how you're going to commute, how you'll find housing there, and what the location is like. So the research programs that I've applied to, their stipends usually range from $3,500 to around $5,000. I know for NYU it was 3,500, and they also included housing, I think dormitories in their NYU buildings, I believe. And that was really helpful because you wouldn't have to pay for any of those things. They're also paying for your living expenses. And so the only thing that you actually have to pay for is just food, clothing, those necessities, toiletries, all those things. But it's a really good idea to look at the locations, how you'll get there. If you're living at home, then you'll be able to save money there. And if you're housing, if you want to live in an apartment or you want to live on their dorms, sometimes programs will not offer housing and you will have to live and find your own apartments, which will be quite tedious and a little bit expensive. And lastly, professors and labs of interest. So if you don't find a lab that you're interested in, but the program sounds really cool, it's always a really good idea to look for more programs and see and expand your horizons so you can have more opportunities, more choices to make. And yeah. All right, so action plan. The very first thing that you should do is finish your spreadsheet or your timetable before you reach out to your professors for letter of recommendations, or I put it for short, LORs. The next thing to do is create and organize templates. So the next slide, I'll show you what I've done in the past. It's kind of messy, but you'll get the gist of it. And so it includes all my personal statements, my cover letters, and my resumes and CVs. So over here, I actually blacked out my name just for privacy purposes, since we're uploading this on YouTube later. What I did was I categorized it into my sophomore year for my summer 2020 apps. And so this is the timetable draft. A lot of my other ones, I wrote the school name and the drafts or personal statement essays. Pretty simple headers, but it's really clear because Google Drop Docs, like if you ever need a specific school, like, oh, I'm trying to look for George Washington or Johns Hopkins, then I just go into the search bar, search up JHU, and all of those JHU related titles will pop up and I can just click on those. So sometimes people, they will choose to have all of their personal statements for every single school they're applying to into one cohesive doc. If that works for you, go ahead, do that. But for me personally, I like having everything in separate pages and separate statements. So the most I would do is I would collate all the written supplementals for one school together. But even then, it's a little bit messy. So what I like to do is I would just personally put one statement per doc. It might get a little messy, but for me, in my head, it works out pretty well. All right, so written supplementals. The resume content may vary. So, for example, if you're applying for wet labs, it's very important to put your past research experience, like your bench research, all the way up front for your experience and volunteer headers in your resumes. The reason why is because you only have one page. That's different from a CV. A CV is where you can put as much as you want, all the experience that you want, all into as many pages as you want. So I think my physician, when I did a medical internship, I basically saw her CV had like 20 to 30 pages, but that's because she had 10 plus years of experience. So that's why she had this many pages. But for resumes, I've attended many medical program Zoom workshops in the past semesters or the past summers, and they've all said that if they look at a person's resume and they find out it's more than one page, they often toss it out because they realize that the person who's applying didn't even look at their instructions. So if they can't follow this instruction, then how can they follow the rest? So make sure it's very important to keep it at one page max and keep it relevant to that position. So if you're doing clinical, if you've had medical shadowing, or if you've done medical scribing, it's very important to put that first and then put your bench research. But then again, it may vary. And so you can always refer to your physician or your PI or your TA and to see how they would preferably put or prioritize those things. So it will always vary and it depends on those programs. But generally, this is what you should follow. And so letter recommendations, this is one of the most important things that all the professors always touch upon in their syllabuses and when you talk to them in office hours. So what I recommend is emailing them for an appointment before mentioning anything about letter recommendations or summer programs, just to let them know that you're going there just to make friends or just to keep in touch with them, and then bring up the part of requesting for a letter of recommendation. Unfortunately, because it's COVID, I'm not too sure if many of you will be able to go into their office hours. So if not, an email, a really nice, polite, and courteous email is just as effective, especially during the season. So professors will probably understand, and it will be better for them, and it's more hygienic if everyone just stays socially distanced. So for now, it's a good exception to email them about your requests for letter recommendations. So I personally would request all of you, if you are doing this process, to notify professors at least 1 month in advance. I know it's a big wide gap, but it's usually really helpful for them, and it shows that you respect their time and their decision, just to let them know that they have their own time for grading their own classes, exams, and helping their own students, as well as helping you out with your programs, because this is a favor that you're asking of them and they're not getting paid for this. So always be courteous, be polite, give them room to figure things out. And I would say no less than 2 weeks. If you really do have to reach out to them within 2 weeks, be as polite as you can. Otherwise, sometimes professors will think it's a little bit impolite and disrespectful of their time. And so, what you usually do when you want to email your professors after they've accepted your request is to provide your timetable. So, the one that I was showing earlier in my Google spreadsheet, all the list of programs that you are asking them to write for. So, if you have a master list, make sure that master list is just for yourself. And you create another document for those professors to look at. So they'll know exactly what they have to write for. Because a lot of programs, they will ask professors to write different survey questions and different essay prompts. So they'll have to write unique things for every single program. So it's best to give them a very clear picture. And also include the program's website. So if they want to look into it a little bit more and see for themselves, it's a good idea to put that into your timetable as well, even in your email headers. So then they'll be able to refer back and forth. All right, so letter of recommendations continued. It's a really long list, but always make sure to update your professors on your progress report and see how far you've done, what apps you've submitted, which one you need more time on. It's always a good idea to always keep them in check. So for example, what I did in my freshman and sophomore year was almost every week. Well, I was pretty close to my professor, so it was all right. But almost every week, I would put in the subject headline, update number 2 from Joyce on XYZ program. And they would always email me back saying, yes, got it. We know what's going on. We know what's submitted and what needs to be more delayed. And even if there's one program that you decided to drop completely, make sure to tell your professor, even though your professors won't get those submission notifications when you submit your application, it's a good thing to let them know well in advance so they don't waste their time doing that program and they'll just focus on the ones that you want them to submit. And so post submission, is it a good idea to just sit and wait after you're done? Probably not. So, or most definitely not. So what I would always suggest is be as polite as you can. Like I said before, write a thank you card and a gift for professors. Professors really, really like it when people show their gratitude. And even if it's not a gift, even if you just stop by their office saying, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you doing this for me. It's always a good idea to do that. And they'll be really, really happy to see that. Um, and make sure to update professors on program commitments. So whether if you get accepted or if you get rejected, either way, just let them know, keep them updated. And if you do go to that program, just come back after the school year ends and tell them all about it, because these professors really like hearing students getting into research as well, or even medical or clinical research. And they do want to help you get to the best of your abilities and to reach for your further future career goals. So in general, always be on time with faculty, professors, TAs. This is a favor that they're doing for you. And so they really want the best for you. So always be doing things in a timely manner. Okay, let me do a little time check. Okay, we're doing pretty well. Cool. So this is a little infographic from Indeed on how to format your cover letter. Not all programs will require you to make a cover letter, but the ones that are bigger, I would say the NSF SURF program, that one is pretty big on doing personal statements, cover letters, and CVs and resumes. So they want all of that. And so the first would be your date and contact information, your salutation greetings, opening paragraph. I believe this one, I didn't read too closely, but this one probably isn't tailored to biological sciences or STEM in general, but this is exactly what a STEM cover letter should look like as well. So your name, heading, your middle paragraphs, your closing paragraphs, and your complimentary close and signature. So always make sure to have someone who's hopefully like a parent or your PI or instructor to look over your cover letters, or even like your siblings if they're able to, just to see if another set of eyes can look at this and see that it's professional enough, or if it tailors to whatever you want the recruiters to see exactly. And just a little FYI, Indeed is really good for medical internships. So if any of you are pre-med and you want to look into medical scribing or medical fellowships and shadowing, this site is really good for dropping your resumes in, getting those interviews in, and snagging probably some opportunities. I think I got one of my first medical shadowing and scribing opportunities from Indeed. So this is a really good source to get all of your opportunities. Okay, so this is what a CV looks like. Last semester, we were only able to give you all the resume workshop because we were short on time. I apologize for that, but this semester, we're definitely going to try getting a curriculum vitae workshop for you all, hopefully with the Career Center with Mr. Haynes. And so hopefully if he has time, we'll be able to set this up for you. But the CVs are more important for those research summer internships. Medical internships, not as much for my experience, but a lot of the professors for who are scouting for all of you guys for their summer internships, they do like seeing your full-blown list and not just one condensed resume page. And so usually what is included in a CV is a logical order of your presentations, your publications. Formatting is very important. Yeah, mostly Word documents. Sometimes they like PDFs, but I would always suggest using a Word document file and easy to read. And so I know that if you look on Google Images and you search up CVs or resumes, a lot of them turn out to be very aesthetically pleasing or very artsy, as you would say. But for STEM, the best thing to do, or my tip, is to not make it as aesthetic as you can and make it as clean and concise. And usually they're black and white, so keep it as simple as possible. Usually when people see something aesthetic, it takes up a lot of space. And so instead of something that could be done in 3 pages or less, your CV might turn out to be like 6 pages because there's so many nice boxes and whatever. It's nice, but for STEM settings, it's not as recommended. So keep it clean, more compact, and that will be the best CV possible. All right, so to summarize what I was talking about just now, this is the priority roadmap that I personally go by. You can always, like I said before, change it up if you want. But what I always do is number one, get that timetable done, organize everything in my Google Drive. My folders are always by schools and by which applications are due first. It might take a long time organizing everything, but rest assured, it's going to be very, very worth it. It's going to save you a lot of time in the long run too, and it'll be a lot better for stress management too. So include all your program info, all the professional or potential letter recommendation professors that you plan to reach out to. So after you're done organizing, now you can go on to gathering your letter of recommendations. And so personally, I would say give at least 2 to 3 weeks or at least 1 month in advance for your professors, reach out to them. And then afterwards, you can start working on your SMAs and resumes in your CVs. So I think the programs that I've applied to, they're very, very stingy on due dates. So if they don't get your letter recommendation on time, they will not accept your essays or your resumes. And some programs, they will actually require your letter recommendations to be put in, I think, like 2 to 3 weeks before. So you have to always be very up to date on these program deadlines. And so, yes, peer review possible. Get everyone to look at your essays and see if it's very good, no grammar mistakes, and everything is concise. Lastly, second to last thing is fees and deadlines. So know those deadlines for submitting applications. If they're by mail, you have to make sure that you submit them by priority mail or first class just to see if you can get that in time. Because those, even if it's mailed in, they're also very stingy on the deadlines. So be prepared for that. And then lastly, thank you notes. So give all your professors a thank you note, a kind gift, and update your professors on what your acceptances look like and where you're planning on spending your summers. All right, so supplementals continued. If your program offers interviews, which might be a little bit daunting at first, I know many of you are freshmen and sophomores, don't be worried. These are actually, for me as a freshman, it was pretty fun. So interviews will come in-person interviews, phone calls, and Zooms. So based on my experience, when I was doing wet lab research interviews, those were done through phone calls. And many of them nowadays, I believe for COVID, they're going to be through Zoom because safety purposes and safety measures. But for my medical scribing and shadowing, that was actually done in person in the hospital. I actually went to their office and had to talk to them, and I got a little bit of probably like a little walkthrough of what they usually do. So it was pretty nice, a little bit daunting at first, especially as a freshman, but remember to always practice, practice, and practice some more. So the best thing to do is to understand the overview of your desired lab's research. Know what your professor does, what the TAs are working on, and their past publications. That way, when they ask you about what your interests are and if they actually align with their interests, then they'll be able to see, wow, this person actually knows what we're doing. They're generally interested in research. I do want to accept this person, or I do want to talk to them some more. And second, always understand your own past research as well. So if you've done research back in high school and it's still applicable for your resumes, or if you did something, let's say genetics research in your sophomore class, understand in depth what every single step or process entailed and why you did procedure XYZ. Reason why is because in my general experience, recruiters always ask in depth. They'll say, oh, why did you do this? Or why did you change something like this? Or what was the outcome for this? Or what is your applications for the future? And if you get stuck on one part, they might think that you actually didn't do the research, or this was something long ago and it doesn't interest you as much anymore. So it's always good to keep yourself updated. And if you have to do more background research on why you did certain things or protocols, always do that. It's better safe than sorry. And when I say practice, practice, and practice some more, what I mean is always use all the resources that the Career Center at Baylor applies or gives out. And so we're also going to be hosting a few interview workshops for Burst, and that'll be coming up soon. But you can practice with anyone, practice with your parents, practice with your siblings, even your roommates. I personally did it a lot with my roommates last year before doing a lot of the Zoom call interviews, and that helped me a lot. So just treat your roommate as someone who is like a professional recruiter or even like a physician, and just talk to them using those basic building block interview questions like, tell me about yourself, or give an elevator pitch, for example, or what is your research about, and what are your strengths and weaknesses. And one thing that I just thought about in my head, if you go on glassdoor.com, they have a lot of interview questions or practice questions that you can use for yourself, or have the person who's interviewing you for practice rounds say them to you so that you can actually record yourself and speak to yourself over and over again to practice those questions. It's nicer to practice them instead of going impromptu and just impulse speaking, because sometimes things won't work out exactly how you map it out in your head. So if you get a little bit nervous, then you might trip up and it might not be a good show. So always practice, and Glassdoor is very good. Glassdoor has a lot of interview questions for specific companies. So if you want to work at this specific research lab or this biotech company, they actually have recruiters that put out those practice questions for you. So it's a very good idea to take advantage of those. All right, let me see if I skipped anything. Yes, I did. Oh no. Okay, cool. So medical internships. So I'm going to give a little bit more advice for medical internships or even for nursing internships, because this is one of the most recent ones I've done. So most important for your resumes and just for your qualifications, get a HIPAA certification. This one can be done through online. I believe you can do it online. And they also offer some classes, but it varies by location. So you'll have to check on that and you can Google it for yourself. Languages are also very helpful. I know that for our STEM majors, we do require, I think, 1 or 2 years of a foreign language. And so personally, when I've talked to physicians at my internships, they've all told me that I think Spanish, Chinese, those are the top two languages or skills that they usually look for. I know French is pretty helpful too, but I think they said that in the States, Spanish is incredibly helpful. A lot of our patients that I had to work with for my ophthalmology internship, a lot of them were actually only Spanish speaking, or some of the terms that they used, they can only express that in Spanish. And so being able to use your language skills, being able to interpret and then tell your doctors is really, really helpful. And the doctors will be able to gain trust more easily and to allow you to do more tasks. Mental preparation. So for those who are also seeking or medical internships, every single day in the clinic and hospital will be very different. There's going to be different people coming in with different cases, different diagnoses. So the best thing to do is always get enough sleep. Number one, get enough sleep. get out of your comfort zone, or at least mentally prepare yourself to get out of your comfort zone and be able to just face any of the challenges that you see every day. Even if you're working in a private clinic, things will arise out of nowhere. And some people who aren't regular patients, they will come in and just say, like, I have this problem. And it's going to be very daunting sometimes. But as long as you mentally prepare yourself and make sure that you're strong enough, and just always trust your physician and the people who are working around you, like your co-interns, then that'll be very, very important and good for your like self-growth as well. Um, one last advice would be to learn from the physician all the time. Be very open to learn from them. If there's a lot of constructive criticism from them that they're trying to teach you, or sometimes if physicians are a little bit brash or a little bit rude, it's okay. Take that as constructive criticism, take that as a learning process, a curve, and always learn from that. And the best thing to do is if you keep on showing that you're very interested in learning some more, then the physicians will realize that you're very trustworthy and you're very hardworking. And so the more that they trust you, the more jobs and the more opportunities that they'll actually let you do. So like shadowing, for example, if they find that you're very eager to learn and they trust you with their patients, then they'll slowly get you into more of their other activities, and they'll slowly able well, they'll give you opportunities such as like scribing. And scribing is a very tedious task and something that requires a lot of learning from mistakes and requires you to learn from your, let's say, improvement and experience. So they can upgrade you and promote you from shadowing to scribing, if that's what you like. Okay, so advice in general. Let me see a time check. Okay, we're doing well. So do not procrastinate. Back in high school, when I was applying for internships and research programs, I made the mistake of doing them at least like 1 or 2 nights before they were actually due. And it was the most stressful thing ever. So that was like my junior year, my senior year. And for us in college, we're basically in like the same situation as when we were like junior and seniors back in high school. We have all these exams, we have these midterms and finals that are always coming up closer than we expect. So treat applications or summer programs as like a 3-hour credit course. And these things can be done within weeks. So if you finish these things or you're good at writing essays and personal statements within days, then please do it as fast as possible so that you can get this out of the way and you can focus on school, because school is always our number one priority. A lot of the programs really heavily look at GPA. So if your GPA isn't what they usually look at in the range or they prefer in the range, like I know one of them said straight up like 3.7 or 3.8. So if they don't see that, then they won't accept you. Or they'll look into your interview and they'll ask you why you didn't get the certain number or your certain GPA. But in general, if you finish this earlier, then you'll be able to work hard for your classes. And if they also see some growth in your classes, in your grades, so for example, if you didn't have the GPA requirements or you didn't meet them, but you were able to successfully bring that up to a higher GPA, they'll be able to see that by the time that you finish that semester or that term, and they'll actually consider. And so a lot of the times physicians also like seeing the growth. So don't worry if your GPA is low or it's on the lower spectrum. If you work hard and you finish these applications and just keep on continuing your hard work in your classes, then that'll be good too. Yes, so respect your letter recommendations professors' time and their decision. Sometimes, rare cases, professors might decline you. Don't feel too bad about that. Don't take it personally. Many times it's not because of you, but it's because the professor has a lot of work. Even for bursts, when we reach out to professors to see if they can talk to us for like general meetings or certain workshops or panels, sometimes they have to decline because they actually have a lot of things going on for them, their personal lives. They have to take care of their students' office hours, or they take on more priorities. These are all things that are very important for them, and they have to prioritize first. And then second will be for us. I remember talking to one of my bio professors when they're writing my letter recommendations. They told me that it actually takes around 2 to 3 hours a week to gather all the students' summer programs, deadlines, and all their timetables and work it out. Because a lot of these professors, they get at least like 30 to 40 of the students asking them. So imagine all of these, but times 2 hours. It's crazy. So make sure that if they do decline your request, it's all right. Make sure you have other professors that you can ask for or you can request for. And sometimes it doesn't have to be professors. It could also be a physician that you worked with in the past, or another PI that you've worked with for your other summers or your previous summers. Those are really good people to ask for because they've seen your work. They've seen how you work in lab settings or in clinical settings, and they can also be very, very good recommenders. All right, so start now. So I understand that many of the summer programs, they've actually opened up, I think in December or in November. And a lot of the deadlines, I believe, are coming up, yeah, like end of February or like early March. So the best thing to do is if you haven't started, start now, use those basic timetables. Don't stress about it. Just take like chunks of it at a time. So if you have the weekend, take advantage of the weekends, take advantage during dinner times. You might have to sacrifice some free time just to work on these programs. And so I would suggest you at least once a week put in at least 4 to 5 hours at least for these for working out and hashing out these summer programs if you haven't started. And bottom line is to not be afraid. Do not be afraid at all. So I've talked to some people who are freshmen and underclassmen last semester telling me that sometimes they don't feel like they're good enough for these programs or they think they're just going to get rejected. So there's no use of spending time on writing these essays. But actually, it's even better to, well, not even better, but it's really good to still write these essays, write these prompts, these cover letters, even if you get rejected, because this is a really good learning experience. Sometimes these professors will tell you to actually come back next year when you get more experience at school, or if you want to do more research on campus, or you want to learn. And sometimes professors say, please take this class like microbiome or genetics and then come back. And so when you come back the second time and you improve yourself from what you did before, then it's a really good sign to them that you're hardworking, you still want to join, you want to express your interest, and they will accept you in the future. So yes, rejections are a great learning curve. For me, I like looking at my past cover letters and seeing how I improved from before and seeing how I can improve in the future. And so always try and try again. Interviews too. If you mess up on one time or if you're too nervous for one of your phone calls, it's all right. After you interview, just send them an email saying, thank you for taking time out of your day to talk with me. I think this is really good practice for me and very good experience, and I hope to hear back from you soon. And you can always just keep on practicing, even with yourself, for your future applications too. So it's not end of the world. It's always a good learning experience. All right, so before I take questions, I know a lot of people have asked summer program versus on-campus lab research. Which one is better? Which one should I do? And should I do both? So the one answer I can give you is it depends on your learning style at school or at Baylor. You have to know yourself really well. You have to know how you succeed in school. So if you prefer to give all of your time to just your clubs and your volunteer work, as well as studying for your exams, for your school classes, if you're taking like 18 hours or like 17 hours, um, it's more likely that you'd want to spend your time just doing schoolwork during the school year and then summer programs. But it differs for every single person. If you're able to keep up your time management really well and you're really efficient with your time, you can definitely go for both lab research on campus as well as studying for school and doing your schoolwork. A lot of our officers do this. Personally, for me, I understand myself very well. I like putting my time more completely for burst, putting my 100% effort for burst and workshops for you all, as well as studying. So I choose summer programs only and sticking with those summer programs. So you can always test it out. If you don't like on-campus labs or if it's too much for you, always talk to those professors, be completely transparent with them and say, I'm sorry, I might have to take a few days off or a few months off and see how I actually assimilate to these schedules and situations. So it depends on your learning style. If something doesn't work out, it's okay. Try it again. Start from square one and then see if you can just do summer programs. But yes, all these options are very good options. It's just depending on your own learning style. Okay, so COVID updates. It's really stressful to think about what our future will hold. And for the near future, if it happens that if it happens the same thing where the 2020 cohorts got completely scratched out and terminated, it might get a little bit stressful. But my advice is don't worry, just take it step by step, see what these programs are actually offering or not offering. Look at their websites, check in with their emails. A lot of them have PR teams, so you can always reach out to them or their secretaries and see what their status is or if they're continuing their programs for this summer. Most likely, it might continue, so there might be programs going on, but I'm afraid that the ones in like California or the bigger cities like New York, like NYU, they might still be deciding if they do want to keep these programs running for this summer. But always constantly check for those program status updates and see how everything goes. And yeah, just email them if you ever have any doubts or if you have any questions. All right, so burst resources. We have a lot of resources. I was looking over these the other day, and I always look at this when I was a freshman and a sophomore, and actually most of the research opportunities that I was able to acquire came from this database. So if you go to baylor.edu/burst or our main page, you can go to the sidebar and you can click on the tab that says research database, and it'll lead you to this whole list of all of these research opportunities. Our resources chairs have done such an amazing job on keeping these very, very clear, very organized in like, let's say, for example, like research on campus versus research outside. All of these things are very, very useful for you guys. And so take advantage of these. This is a little bit of what Burst has to offer as well. So I actually just scrolled down from the page before. And so this is what they also have. So they have opportunities for the pre-health internships for all of you pre-medical and pre-health students, national opportunities, and even scholarships. So everything is very organized, in depth, and they're all in spreadsheets. So there's no problem for or any complications if you have to find anything. And so if you click on, I believe if you click on one of the program links, it leads you to this side. So the cell molecular summer internships. I think someone in the chat box said that they were interested in those. So this is a really good tool. This is from one of the links that I pulled up from the Burst resources page. And there's over like 6-7 pages of these. So any school that's like closest to you back home or in Texas, these are all for you that you can look over, and there's a lot of information on those. So this is really helpful for you all. And let's see. Okay, so thanks for coming. If you have any questions, you guys can feel free to unmute yourself, put it in the chat, and I can help answer. But yes, I will also, let's see. I'll drop the link down below in the chat box so it might be easier. But you can also use your phone to scan this QR code, and hopefully that will work. But let's see. Okay. Chat box. Okay, yes. So you can put your, you can select that Google form and sign out and you'll be good to go.